constantly battling with it. All right. So I've got this sim here for like big bets on like Ace King 7. So I've got this Ace King 7 board. I've got these giant bets. I'm just potting down basically. What I want to do, well, I'll tell you what's going on. So I imported a bunch of my old hands into Poker Tracker. So these are hands from basically a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I've been battling with this kind of best hand, like one money issue. Like, okay, so I check it on this time frame. This thing is like 3 blinds a hand better than I'm currently doing, and like 2 big blinds a better than I've done over the last million.
Different time period.
Yes and no. The thing is that if you look at the value of your best hands on Ace King 7, like, they're minimizing it a little bit better, but like my set should still be, you know, 13 big blinds on average on this thing. 13, 14, depending on what the card removal effect is. My 2-pair combo should still be closer to 10. And if I look over my last, 180,000 hands on Ignition, and we look at me c-betting with my sets, I mean, they're only at 10.6. And my 2 pairs are at 9.7. So, I mean, obviously, there's like 2 blinds missing here. Right?
Compared to that, just compared to what the solver says it should make.
Yeah. So, like, okay,
right.
So, and there's like, there's actually another idea around this, which is basically your best hands have to make that much. Or auto-bluffing is profitable.
Yeah, that makes intuitive sense.
I mean, that's the constraint here, right? So, like, either like Kings is worth 15 big blinds here, or every Jack 9 combo that I can possibly put in here until Kings is worth 15 big blinds is going to be worth 2 or 3 bigs.
It just means they're overfolding if you're not getting max value with it.
Yeah, or I'm not building the right pot size, which is actually the one that worries me more than the other option.
Yeah.
Because I'll go. So this sim is really simple, Eric. I'm not trying to like discover the secrets of like small pot play. What I'm really curious about this thing is like, how should I grow the pot when I have a decent hand? And when I'm looking at those regions, I don't need to include raises for my opponent. I don't need to include bets for my opponent, because at the end of the day, what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to figure out, you know, which hands should I just be trying to pot out here. And I'm going to assume on this type of board texture, I don't get a ton of counterplay, right?
No.
Because, like, people don't bluff raise it. So, I mean, for the most part, like, pot out is going to be your best option with this. And, you know, the solvers have even found this in a lot of these spots. Okay, so let's say hypothetically we walk into this game, and this was definitely something that you were doing earlier when we started coaching, and now we bet half pot every time here with our hands. So this strategy feels easier in some ways because you can value bet more thinly. You can, you know, obviously do a bunch of things here. And, you know, but if we now look at the value of the best hands in these regions,
it's going down.
So just substantially, it's like 5 bigs a hand. So
we talked about this exact board texture last time too.
Yeah, this was actually the inspiration for this, Eric. Is you were talking about this board, and I was like, "You never bluffed it, man." Right? I was like, you know that the big bet's something that happens here. You've never bluffed it. Like, the guys are just going to kneecap the value of Kings if you don't bet this board, you know, aggressively.
Yeah, I mean, I of course do bluff it. I don't know about if the data was completely accurate, but
you bluffed it once. You bluffed it once or something. It wasn't like so. Just to kind of roll back onto this, Pio's potting this thing 73% of the time.
that's with the half pot.
No, this is full.
Oh, you went back to full. Okay.
This is the full
Yeah.
pot sim.
Let me look up. This is button versus big one.
Yeah, button versus big blind, and I node locked for what my opponents have, so they've got a little bit less ace queen combos, I think, than the solver expects. And just a little more just random trash.
Yeah, wizard checks 50%, bets 50%.
Yeah, and I came up with that one too once I gave a little bit more strategic
Play back.
options to my opponent. I basically said, hey, the guy might be able to bet twice. This one has the strategic options for my opponent. I end up at 50.
Yeah.
Well, that's 223 combos. And the nut region here, I mean, we can, run a quick count on this, but basically ace 10 plus is roughly 12 times 4. And then you end up with kind of a trail here of like 9 sets, and then probably another trail of like 9 to 10 more value bets, give or take. So, if you only value bet this board, you're going to bet like 67 combos out of 500 roughly, or 460. So like you're not going to have a very high frequency here. It's going to be like 14% roughly. And I might be off by a little bit here, but I'm not off by a lot. And so, like, when you think about this kind of big bet region in this situation, really the key component of it, Eric, is to try to convince guys to call you. And the only way to do that is to launch enough bluffs here that they actually want to. And so when I think about kind of these big bet strategies to try to recoup some of the value that I've been losing here with my sets, I really think about, basically making sure that I get the flop bluffs right, that I get the turn bluffs right, and I get the river bluffs right. Because that way, even if they want to be nitty, it doesn't matter. Like
You'll make money.
Yeah.
Off the bluff.
Yeah, the bluffs offset the value hands. I mean, the way GTO roughly works in this spot is that when I bet this turn at 17 big blinds, this guy loses the pot every time I bet unless he has a hand strong somewhere in my value range. So if he has a hand in my value range like ace jack, he'll make back some of the pot. Everything else loses. So, okay. So that's kind of a fancy way of saying, like, you just put a bunch of -7s on everything they called flop. Because half that pot is his. Like, half the pot is what he put in that situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if he has ace 5, he just eats a -7 big blind loss. And that's what that's what goes into your win rate and allows you to buy your things, right? If you play high stakes, maybe you could buy a yacht. But I mean, with this sort of idea, like, basically the Pio always just backtracks this to the previous street and puts a -7 on all the ace 6 combos on the betting note. And it's going to be the same on the river here when the pot's 5,000. Is if you do want to call down here with your ace 8 combo, and I bet if I've done this right, it doesn't matter. Basically, all I've guaranteed here is a -24 on the bet note. Doesn't take too many of those before you start, really being able to, basically accumulate quite a bit of win rate. But I think more importantly, because I don't really expect my bluffs to ever outperform over any period of time, because of, it's basically a structural reason why the bluffs don't outperform. Don't outperform over time because you have way more bluffs than value bets, right? I mean, even in our example hand, it was basically 3 bluffs to 1 value bet on the flop. And so if some guy did let you just bluff him off his hand every time, he's going to lose so much money because essentially you have 3 bluffs for every 1 value bet. It's a lot harder to get value bets than it is bluffs. And so over time what's happened, and this is actually kind of cool, like even before Pio we called roughly GTO in common spots. because if you get too far off that number, then all of a sudden there's a lot of, well, I mean, there's just a lot of exploitation that occur and can get really, really expensive on either side. And so, if you always pay off a value bet, then all of a sudden my sets, are plus 100. if you always pay off. And, and if you always fold to my bluffs, basically every hand worse than, every hand worse than two pair loses whatever the pot is. So, between minus 2.5 and minus 25 big blinds. So, rather than do that, Eric, what people do is that they try to call MDFs.
Right.
But
why is it calling if it loses money?
Well, because it loses less than folding.
Okay, so that's just how the EV is being calculated.
Yeah, the EV gets calculated on the node. So if you stumble across this node, and this happens all the time in GTO Wizard, which is why you get so annoyed with their hero calls probably, is that from GTO Wizard's perspective, we only care about this node we got here. And so we need to figure out whether calling the bet or folding to the bet is better. So if you take something like Ace-3 here, which is, kind of a GTO Wizard approved call, but truthfully is probably pretty poor against most of the pool, it still loses 20 big blinds here if you look from the pre-flop play.
Right, but it loses less than it would if it folded.
Yeah. I mean,
so it calculates it as if the whole hand, and not just I think I just didn't realize that.
Yeah, I mean it's a little subtle, but basically, the call here is minus 20, and the fold here is minus 25 for that hand. So, obviously we choose call because it's minus 20, and at the end of the day, the game's symmetric, so if you're playing the same strat as your opponent, you're going to put in roughly the same amount of, you're going to get 5 big blinds more than he does. That's the idea with it. And so you're actually plus 5 in win rate there with that call, so Pio measures it as plus 5. But, if you want to look at this as like what you eat on in these scenarios, it's something that you're not going to be able to eat on.
Yeah, I wonder how Wizard calculates them.
They calculate them the same way. It's the right way to calculate them.
It shows it as like plus EV or like 0 EV, so it's not calculating it maybe based on the whole hand.
No, it'd just be calculating on the street. So, I mean, what the 0 EV here means, though, effectively, is you lost the pot.
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter whether you call or fold, the bet did what it was supposed to do. You lost this pot. You can't improve your EV with one option. The thing is, in practice here, Eric, let's pick an old school strategy here.
I've gotten confused by it where it'll be like, checking